Today we have Nancy Northup, the president and CEO of the Center for Reproductive Rights. Nancy, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for following this. It's such an important issue.
Now, of course, your organization is going to be representing Dr. Braid and his clinic, and we all know that Dr. Braid is the San Antonio physician who wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post admitting that he performed an abortion after Texas's 6-week abortion ban went into effect. Now, shortly after that op-ed was written, a lawsuit was duly filed by a disbarred attorney out of Arkansas. So is there any sense of relief that now this issue can finally be litigated?
Well, absolutely. What's really been frustrating about the Texas case is that the Center for Reproductive Rights and other legal organizations, a really big coalition, sued back in July of 2021, months before it was to go into effect on September 1st, because that's what you do when you know something's going to cause harm, and it's as blatantly unconstitutional as this, is you sue so that you can get an injunction. Well, because of the very devious way in which this 6-week ban is drafted, giving private vigilantes the ability to sue, and the government says, oh, we're not enforcing the law, we haven't been able to get that injunction. The United States government came in and could not get that injunction. They're going to have a hearing later this week. But so this is an opportunity with these new lawsuits that have been filed against Dr. Braid to finally get this issue before a court. It's a blatantly unconstitutional law, and people are suffering in the state of Texas. And so far, the courts haven't stepped in. It's very frustrating.
Now, prior to this issue being litigated, we'd seen an immediate chilling effect take place in Texas. Do you have any indication of just how many abortions in the state were impacted after SB 8 went into effect?
Well, probably about 85% of the abortions in the state of Texas, because that's how many are usually after 6 weeks. 6 weeks is before most people would know that they are pregnant. And so most abortions in Texas are now unattainable. And we're hearing from our, clients from the clinics in Texas that, they're having, for the people who are still even coming in. So like Dr. Braid is saying, look, he's having to turn about a third of the patients that are coming in away. But many more aren't coming in because they know that they can't get an abortion in the state of Texas. And so they're just going directly to other states like Oklahoma or New Mexico. Some people going as far as New York, Illinois, Florida, California. I mean, everyone, Colorado, they're all reporting that they're seeing patients from Texas.
Does a doctor have the ability to be sued multiple times for performing abortions? In other words, like once Dr. Braid has already done it, is it just can he just have carte blanche to continue doing it because he's already involved in litigation?
No, every single incidence of performing an abortion in violation of the 6-week ban, every single incident itself could be the basis of unlimited number of lawsuits. Right. I mean, this legislation says that anybody can sue. As you pointed out, someone in Arkansas sued, and so from all over the country, people could sue. From all over Texas, people could sue. There's no limit. And that's for one abortion. If he were to have been providing abortions, for the entire time that this hasn't been settled, every single one of those, limitless numbers of lawsuits.
Now, when is this issue going to court? And are you doing anything to expedite this process? Because, think about how many women need abortions today. Women don't have the luxury of just penciling in their abortions months from now once the justice system's had a chance to get its act together.
Exactly. And, let's just start with the impact that it's having on people in Texas. It is having the most profound impact on people who already are challenged in accessing healthcare. So that's Black, Indigenous, people of color, people in rural communities, immigrants in Texas where there are internal checkpoints. You literally can't leave the state. So, there's going to be a hearing on the 1st of October. The Department of Justice has sued Texas in a case called the United States versus Texas, which is awesome because never before has the U.S. come in to sue a state about an abortion restriction. That hearing for an injunction will be on Friday, October the 1st. So that will be the next opportunity. We and others have tried every way to get this expedited. We asked for expedited consideration the first time we went to the Supreme Court. We went back to the Supreme Court last week and asked for expedited consideration. We've gone to the Court of Appeals for expedited consideration. It's just been really, really kind of stonewalling from the courts. And again, this is what is harming people who have a constitutional right to these services. There's no question about that.
Now, you're also representing Jackson's women's health in an upcoming Supreme Court case, and that deals with the constitutionality of a Mississippi law banning abortions after 15 weeks of presidency. Do you expect this one to come before or after the case challenging the merits of the Texas lawsuit?
It probably will be coming before. We have argument in the Mississippi case in which the state of Mississippi has asked the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. That argument's going to be on December the 1st. So even though we've gone to the Supreme Court in the Texas case just last week saying, look, expedite an actual Supreme Court decision on Texas, which is an unusual thing, but they do have the power to do it. Just skip over the Court of Appeals. They've said what they're going to do. That would not likely be heard before December the 1st. So it does look like the first time the Supreme Court's really going to be hearing argument on should Roe versus Wade be overturned is going to be on December the 1st.
So do you expect the ruling from the Mississippi case to basically just answer the other question, with regard to Texas? Like, the Supreme Court can either defer to precedent in Roe, which means that women have the right to a safe and legal abortion, or they won't, in which case it won't matter whether it's a 6-week ban like the one in Texas or a 15-week ban like the one in Mississippi. They're just gutting Roe.
You're absolutely right. There's no way for the Supreme Court to rule for the state of Mississippi in the Jackson Women's Health Organization case, the one argued on December 1st. No way for them to do that without overturning Roe versus Wade. And so that's why so many people have come to the fore. Last week, there were what are called friend of the court briefs that interested parties can file in the Supreme Court case. 50 of those were filed on behalf of Jackson Women's Health Organization on behalf of not overturning Roe versus Wade. It was such a broad group of support from the American Medical Association saying don't overturn Roe versus Wade, the American Bar Association. We had leading athletes, including the WNBA Players Association and the women's soccer team and association of players. So it really has been just phenomenal support. But yeah, this is when it's going to be decided. But hopefully before then, the Texas law will be enjoined, either in the Department of Justice's case, in these defenses to the lawsuits against Dr. Braid, in the underlying case or the first case that was filed by all of us back in July. We can't let this go on in Texas. It's been almost a month. It is just unacceptable to be denying constitutional rights, to be denying health care that people need, and to be forcing people to go out of state. And many just don't have the means to do so.
Now, absent federal legislation like the Women's Health Protection Act, because Roe is effectively only as protected as the precedent that a 6-3 conservative court decides to or not to protect, which is to say like a pretty tenuous degree of protection, what's going to be your argument in defense of both Dr. Braid and Jackson?
Well, I think in those cases, and we have filed our brief in the Supreme Court, we've made clear 3 things about why Roe should be respected. The first is what you just said, which is precedent. I mean, for the rule of law to mean anything, it means that after 48 years, a constitutional decision that has been reaffirmed again and again and again, for very good reasons, needs to stand. I mean, the court's integrity is on the line. So precedent itself. And then the fundamental right, which the court has looked at again and again for 48 years, women's equality. I mean, the ability to participate, and these are the court's own words from almost 30 years ago, women's ability to fully participate in the social, economic, and political life of the nation depend on our ability to control our reproductive health. And, thirdly, the absolute chaos that would occur. They're seeing it right now in Texas. They can look in Texas and see what's happening, where not only are people, leaving the state to try to get abortion services, it's burdening care in other states. In Oklahoma, there are now waits. In Arizona, there are now waits. And so just, if they think this is going to solve some, long-standing dispute about abortion by reversing Roe versus Wade, they've got an absolute different picture that will be coming. So that is what we're arguing to the Supreme Court. But I'm glad that you mentioned the Women's Health Protection Act, because the reality is Congress could fix this entire situation right now. And indeed, the House voted on September the 24th to do just that, to pass the Women's Health Protection Act that would address these unconstitutional bans by making them in violation of the act, that would address every new thing that's come up with under the sun to try to unduly burden the access to abortion care. There's about 50 lawsuits going on right now in various states across the nation about restrictions on abortion care, and the Women's Health Protection Act would address those. So everybody should realize that now it's past the House, the eyes are on the Senate, and we need to be really loud and clear that we're not going to just let rights come and go and ebb and flow based on court hearings, what the Supreme Court does. Congress can fix this right now.
Building on that, of course, and this is my favorite topic because this is, what I find myself talking about every single week is, once we get legislation into the Senate, obviously all of that legislation is being held back by the filibuster. Now, the elimination of the filibuster would allow for legislation like this to pass. So do you have any message to those Democratic holdouts who continue to defend the filibuster at moments like this?
I absolutely do. I mean, the Center for Reproductive Rights is advocating that when we have issues of constitutional deprivation of rights, reproductive rights, voting rights, fundamental constitutional rights, the Senate should not be having the filibuster. A majority of the senators should be able to enact legislation to address violations of constitutional rights. So yes, loud and clear, the filibuster should go so that the Women's Health Protection Act could advance with just a majority of senators.
Now, in a break glass scenario where the Supreme Court does gut Roe, what happens next? How do we protect a woman's right to a safe and legal abortion in this country?
Well, I think there are going to be multiple fronts. One is, of course, is going to be this push for federal legislation. Ultimately, right, that is going to be required to make sure that everyone in the nation has the same rights. But there's also going to be there's going to be a real response in states. There's going to be a response by looking at state constitutions. I mean, the beautiful thing about the American constitutional system is that all of us get to carry two sets of rights, our federal constitutional rights, and each of our states have constitutional rights. And some of those are stronger than the federal constitution. So we'll be looking to protect on that, looking to protect with state legislation. And there's just going to be massive mobilization and protest because it's been really clear, even in the response in Texas, in the response to the Jackson Women's Health Organization case, that, people are not going backwards. We are not going to return to a time when more than half the nation's population does not have control over their bodies, their lives, and their futures. So there will be a tremendous response. We are not going to return to the days before Roe versus Wade.
Now, I don't know how political you want to get here, but this is clearly a political issue. And so even though the politicians and operatives on the right are the ones pushing these laws, the fact is that 70% of Americans, which includes majorities on both sides of the political spectrum, do support Roe. So what would you say to those elected officials in the GOP who are running off the cliff in their desperation to strip women of their bodily autonomy?
I mean, the Center for Reproductive Rights, we work in the court. We don't support and oppose candidates. But I would say to all elected officials, 1 in 4 women have an abortion in their lifetime. So you are absolutely right that the polls are with us. But also what's really important is the decision that people make, the vote they take when it's about their own life. And the 1 in 4 women who choose to have an abortion, they run the political spectrum. They run, urban to rural. They're in every single state. They're in every single person's congressional district, every person's, Senate, state, and every kind of religion, every kind of background throughout different age groups, all of it. And so, as I said before, there is going to be an incredible strong political response. In the end of the day, the right will be protected. It will take some time, perhaps, if the court guts Roe versus Wade. But we've just seen a major, major shift, even in the last, 5 years. I mean, the Biden administration has been incredibly supportive. They are strongly supportive of the Women's Health Protection Act. The vice president invited abortion providers to the White House to meet with her and talk about what the situation is for their patients on the ground. That had never happened before. We're going to have a gender strategy, a national gender strategy coming out of the White House. That had never happened before. There has been the passage of, our annual budget through the House without restrictions on abortion care through the Hyde Amendment. So important, hadn't happened. And so this is really just, it's been a culture shift. It's been a political shift. The fact that you had so many, obviously a majority of the House voting for the Women's Health Protection Act. I mean, the tide has turned. And so I would say to all elected officials, you need to listen to the people.
Well, thank you so much for not only coming here to speak with me, but for the work that you're doing and for women in Texas and Mississippi and across the country. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.